Coming up on Arirang News, China has now confirmed about 8,000 cases of the new coronavirus, and the death toll there has risen to more than 170 as the World Health Organization considers declaring a global emergency. President Moon Jae-in pledges an airtight quarantine regime for the South Koreans to be flown back home from Wuhan, but those people will have to wait a little bit longer because the chartered flights they're meant to take have been delayed. And profits in the fourth quarter at tech giant Samsung Electronics were down by a third due to weakness in its chip business. Business sentiment in South Korea overall is down this month as well. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. China continues to report new cases of the coronavirus now in all provinces of the country. It's been just a few weeks since the virus first broke out in Wuhan, but now the number of people who've caught it in China has outnumbered those who had SARS. Our Choi Jung-yun has the latest.
The new type of coronavirus that first appeared in the Chinese city of Wuhan late last month continues to claim more victims. As of Thursday, the death toll in China tops 170, and the total number of confirmed cases comes to around 8,000, with an infection rate much faster than the SARS outbreak in 2003, which had around 5,300 confirmed cases. As the virus continues to spread, China's President Xi said that preventing and containing it remains a grim and complex task. China's state-run media CCTV reported on Wednesday that Xi has sent a military medical team to the front line to prevent the epidemic from spreading. Emphasizing the role of the military, Xi requested army hospitals to cure patients and science institutes to actively tackle the virus. In order to prevent the virus from spreading, the city of Wuhan has increased its Lunar New Year holiday to 2 weeks. The holiday was originally supposed to end on January 30th, but will now end on February 13th. Companies in the region will delay their reopening. The China CDC said the extension will reduce human-to-human contact, which is a critical way of tackling respiratory infections. China's central government has already extended the holiday 4 days, and other provinces are also delaying the reopening of businesses and schools. The International Ski Federation has also called off Ski World Cup races that were due to take place near Beijing in order to protect the health of the participants. Choi Jung-yun, Arirang News.
The World Health Organization will hold a meeting this Thursday in Geneva to decide whether to declare the coronavirus outbreak a global public health emergency. Our Kim Da-mi has the details.
About a week after saying it's too soon to call the coronavirus outbreak an international public health emergency, the World Health Organization will hold an emergency meeting on Thursday. The meeting will take place at 1:30 p.m. Geneva time or 9:30 p.m. Korea time. Speaking to journalists in Geneva on Wednesday, the WHO chief said he will seek advice on whether the outbreak represents an international concern and recommendations on how to best protect people all over the world.
The continued increase in cases and the evidence of human-to-human transmission outside China are, of course, both deeply concerning.
The organization also recognized the growing evidence that the virus continues to spread outside of China, including in Germany, Vietnam, and Japan.
This disease is still spreading from person to person.
In order to declare a global public health emergency, the WHO Emergency Committee makes a proposal, but the final decision is solely up to the chief. The WHO has declared a total of 5 global public health emergencies in the past decade, including the latest Ebola virus outbreak last year. When declared, an international medical response system will be established, prompting countries and areas to intensify their cooperation towards reining in the virus, including through trade and advising people not to travel. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has promised a tight quarantine on all the South Korean nationals set to return home soon from Wuhan. The president is calling for flawless execution by the authorities and unity among the people in fighting the outbreak. Shin Se-min has this report.
Entering the conference hall after sterilizing his hands with sanitizers, President Moon Jae-in ordered checkups and disinfection of the South Koreans coming from Wuhan on a charter flight set to return Friday. Assuring the Korean people that only those with no sign of symptoms will be returning home after a time in isolation, the president said there would be no compromise when it comes to the public's safety.
현재 교민 가운데 감염증 확진자나 의심 환자는 없는 것으로 파악되고 있습니다. 정부는 임시생활시설이 운영되는 지역 주민들의 불안을 이해합니다. 그에 대한 대책을 충분히 세우고 있고 걱정하시지 않도록 정부가 빈틈없이 관리할 것입니다.
The president's message comes against a backdrop of strong opposition from the two cities, Asan and Sincheon, formerly chosen by the government on Wednesday to house South Korean nationals returning from Wuhan. The president also promised an airtight quarantine to maintain the current status of no secondary infections occurring in South Korea. Moon also instructed his administration to release relevant information quickly and transparently. The president stood firm in dealing with fake news that goes beyond freedom of speech and added that anyone producing and distributing made-up stories would be committing a grave criminal act obstructing public safety.
신종 코로나로부터 우리 자신을 지킬 수 있는 무기는 공포와 혐오가 아니라 신뢰와 협력입니다.
Moon also highlighted the importance of monitoring financial markets closely for any instability while tracking the potential negative impact on companies doing business in China. Despite the difficult task of controlling the spread of the virus, the president promised that the public should not feel anxious and said the nation should overcome this crisis as a whole. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In the meantime, South Korea's plan to fly its nationals out of Wuhan have been put on hold. Two chartered planes were initially arranged to evacuate more than 700 South Koreans from the city on Thursday and Friday, with the first flight to leave this morning. But the Chinese government made some changes to flying permits, so the would-be passengers have been told to wait until further notice. The South Korean government will likely use one chartered plane instead of two, and the Foreign Ministry is currently in close coordination with the Chinese government to rearrange the flight schedules. It hopes to dispatch the plane this evening. The government is also considering providing $5 million in humanitarian assistance to China on top of the medical equipment it's decided to give. South and North Korea have agreed to temporarily close down their joint liaison office until the new coronavirus is contained. Located north of the border in Kaesong, officials are normally stationed there 24/7 so they can communicate. However, the two Koreas decided this morning to close it because of the virus. This means about 60 South Koreans will be leaving. North Korea has been on high alert since the virus broke out. It's not letting tour groups into the country, and it has stopped issuing visas. South Korean companies' business outlook in January has edged down. The Bank of Korea says the business survey index for all industries this month came to 75. This is down a single point from December. The reading is below 100, means companies are more pessimistic about the local economy. However, the index for manufacturing rose 2 points on month to 76. This was attributed to a stronger performance in the semiconductor sector. The index for non-manufacturing, meanwhile, slumped 5 points to 73. South Korea's #1 tech companies continued to struggle towards the end of last year. Samsung Electronics' operating profits in the fourth quarter were down by a third, mainly on weakness in its memory chip business. Hong Yu has more.
Samsung Electronics' operating profits plunged in the fourth quarter of 2019 due to the weak memory chip business. It recorded some $4.4 billion of operating profits in the October to December period. That's down 33.7% on year, but sales rose slightly over 1%. Samsung's operating profit in 2019 as a whole slid almost 53% on year to $23.5 billion, the lowest since 2015. The firm says that favorable sales of premium products attributed to the slight increase in sales, but weak performance of memory chips led operating profits to fall by more than $3 billion. Semiconductor performance deteriorated due to lower DRAM prices. In the display sector, profits from small to mid-sized displays slightly dropped due to lack of demand for certain premium products. An abundant supply of large displays in the market also contributed to weaker display business performance. But Samsung's mobile communication business improved thanks to better sales of flagship products and smartphone models such as the Galaxy A series. Consumer electronics also showed better performance with better profits from sales of lifestyle appliances such as refrigerators, laundry machines, and premium QLED TVs. Still, the firm's performance does not look promising for the first quarter of this year. Samsung says the semiconductor business expects a worse performance in the first quarter, despite a steady demand for memory chips used in servers and mobile communications. The display business will also face hardships due to weaker demand of panels. But looking at the entire year, Samsung expects major businesses such as semiconductors to grow as the firm plans to strengthen technology leadership and normalize memory supplies in the first half of the year. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
South Korea made a trade surplus last year of $71.5 billion, doing business with the countries with which it has free trade agreements. In contrast with non-FTA countries, it had a trade deficit. That's according to the Korea Customs Service, which said Thursday that Korea's biggest surplus was with members of ASEAN at about $39 billion. With non-FTA countries, the deficit was about $32.4 billion. Of the goods South Korea shipped to Canada, about 95% benefited from the two countries' FTA. To the EU, that figure was about 87%, and for the United States, about 85%. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, thank you for making time today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
So the Federal Reserve in its latest meeting has decided unanimously to keep interest rates where they are. President Trump, of course, would like to see them lower, but what was the reason for their decision, and what do you think is going to happen going forward?
U.S. Fed decided to leave its key interest rate at 1.5% to 1.75% over two straight Federal Open Market Committee meetings. The main reason for this is because U.S. economy is pretty robust with low inflation and strong employment. Actually, it is too early to talk about Fed's interest rate decision for this year because it is not clear how U.S. economy and global economies are developing for the remaining of this year. But I would say that in the first half of this year, U.S. economy is highly expected to expanding, so there won't be a reason for Fed to change its key interest rate.
Well, yes, there certainly are a lot of issues up in the air right now, including the coronavirus. And so Wall Street stocks closed very little changed overnight. What's the story in the global financial markets?
Coronavirus outbreak gave, of course, a negative impact on global financial market. However, since coronavirus damage is not over yet, real impact is not yet reflected in global stock prices. Yesterday's New York stock market is mixed with not changing interest rate and coronavirus outbreak. Europe's market, including London and Germany, actually slightly increased. But in today's Asian markets, there was a huge drops in stock prices. In Nikkei by 1.7%, and Shanghai dropped by 2.7%, and Hang Seng of Hong Kong dropped by 2.3%. So it was such a bad day for Asian stock market for today.
Yes, indeed. And Korean stocks also sharply lower today. Their second big drop in just a few days. What's going on there?
So Korean stock market should be bad like that of the Asian stock market because the Korean economy is highly related to China and other Asian countries. As you said, domestic market is also attacked by coronavirus outbreak today. Kospi dropped by 1.7%, and Kosdaq dropped also by 2.1%. So that was a huge drop in a single day, particularly for increased uncertainty related to coronavirus. Domestic institutional investors and foreign investors sold Korean stock in a large scale.
Well, now we just heard about the profits at Samsung Electronics. They were down quite a lot in the fourth quarter of last year. There's also the concerns about the coronavirus affecting that company as well. What do you make of these numbers, and do you think Samsung will see a recovery this year?
Well, if we take a look back, the global semiconductor market, the market itself is really volatile. Sometimes demand increased by 30%, but some other years the demand decreased by negative 30%. And given that situation of the global semiconductor market, last year was one of the worst years in global semiconductor market after 2010. The weak sales of semiconductor decreased Samsung Electronics profit by 50% compared to 2018. It looks that global semiconductor market is recovering from the last quarter of the 2019. Actually, Samsung Electronics net profit is increasing from the end of the last year. So we can have high expectations of the semiconductor market recovery from this year.
All right, well, in other news, we see the European Parliament has now formally approved the deal for Brexit, and that means the UK will leave the EU as of Friday. We've had some time, of course, to assess this situation, but how do you think Brexit will affect the global economy now that it's finally happening, and the Korean economy in particular?
Brexit procedure is finally completed with European Parliament's approval on UK's Brexit plan. But for months, however, there won't be significant changes in both UK and EU because a Brexit transition period is set to December 31st of this year, which is end of this year. If UK Brexit smoothly by building up FTA with each of EU member countries, the impact of Brexit would be very small. But as a worst scenario, UK Brexit with no deal, then internal trade in between EU member countries will be decreased significantly. That means economic growth of the UK could be negative, and global economic growth could be decreased by 0.2%, according to the studies of Bank of England. But Brexit does not hurt UK-Korean economic relations because last year both countries signed on new FTA between the two countries. So Brexit's effects, economic effects on Korea is kind of limited.
Got it. Well, we'll keep a close eye on that situation throughout this year. All right, Professor Kim, we'll have to leave it there for now, though. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, as we were just discussing, the U.S. Federal Reserve in this year's first meeting has decided to keep interest rates where they are, having lowered them 3 times last year. Lee Seung-jae has the details.
The Federal Reserve held its benchmark interest rate steady on Wednesday after all 10 members of the Fed's rate-setting committee voted in favor of it. The benchmark funds rate remains in a range between 1.5% to 1.75%, where it has been since the latter part of last year. It marks the second straight meeting the Fed has stood pat on rates after 3 consecutive reductions in 2019. The Fed's statement signaled a mixed assessment of the U.S. economic outlook. It described consumer spending as moderate, which is a downgrade from strong in December, adding that business investment is still weak. Fed officials say maintaining the interest rate would help to bring inflation closer to the Fed's 2% target after it fell short of that goal last year. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said that the Fed is monitoring a number of potential risks, including the coronavirus outbreak in China.
And it's very uncertain about how far it will spread and what the macroeconomic effects will be in China, in its immediate trading partners and neighbors, and around the world. So in light of that uncertainty, we are very carefully monitoring the situation.
이승재, 아리랑 뉴스.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed into law a new North American trade agreement. At a ceremony at the White House on Wednesday, Trump said they're finally ending what he called the NAFTA nightmare. He called the new deal the most significant and balanced trade agreement in history. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement replaces the 26-year-old NAFTA. It revamps the rules on automobile transactions, e-commerce, and more. U.S. media outlets say the agreement is likely to give President Trump a boost in his bid for re-election this year. However, the ceremony was not attended by any of the key Democrats who helped pass the deal in Congress. The UK will finally leave the EU on Friday, putting an end to its 47-year-long membership. The European Union let go of Britain in their final vote on Wednesday. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
EU member states have bid farewell to the UK in their final vote for Brexit at the EU Parliament in Brussels, with some showing joy, others sadness.
So this vote is not an adieu. This vote, Mr. President, is, in my opinion, only an au revoir.
During a plenary session on Wednesday, 621 MEPs voted in favor of the bill, 49 against. The deal was passed following the UK government's backing last week. Britain will officially leave the EU at 11 p.m. GMT this Friday, becoming the first member to leave the bloc after its 47 years as a member. When it leaves, the number of member states in the EU will tick down to 27. While saying goodbye to the UK, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, emphasized fairness in the trade negotiations lying ahead of them when it comes to access the European single market with zero tariffs.
But the precondition is that European and British businesses continue to compete on a level playing field. We will certainly not expose our companies to unfair competition. We will always love you, and we will never be far. Long live Europe.
After January 31st, both sides will embark on a transition period this year to set out their future relationship. Until then, Britain will remain within the EU's rules and economic arrangements. Watchers say it will be difficult to reach a deal by the year's end, given the tight timeline of only 11 months available for trade negotiations. The EU is preparing for a no-deal contingency plan, as experts have raised the possibility that the talks could fall apart. However, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been making it clear that whatever happens, there will be no extension of the transition period. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The European Union has unveiled its security guidelines for its new 5G networks, and they don't specifically ban products from Chinese tech giant Huawei. The EU's Executive Commission on Wednesday recommended blocking high-risk suppliers from, quote, critical and sensitive parts of the network, but it did not mention any companies by name. It'll be up to individual countries to decide what kind of equipment they use and how. A day earlier, the UK decided to let Huawei set up its 5G network on a limited basis. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was in London on Wednesday, called on the UK to reconsider. Washington has banned Huawei from the rollout of the next generation mobile network, saying China could use it to steal secrets. Hyundai Motor, Mercedes-Benz, and Ford are voluntarily recalling nearly 36,000 vehicles in Korea. Korea's transport ministry said starting today, the three car makers are recalling 15 models for faulty parts at designated repair and service centers. For nearly 13,000 Hyundai Sonatas, the problems are possible power outages due to a faulty circuit board. 13 Mercedes-Benz models are being recalled because they have too much explosive pressure in their airbags. Finally, nearly 4,000 Ford Mondeos are being recalled for a battery sensor that could catch fire. The car makers will notify the owners of the cars via mail or text message. Those who've already fixed those parts at their own expense can apply for compensation. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.